Hello, my name's Bev and I'm the author of the book Please Eat, A Mother's Struggle to Free Her Teenage Son from Anorexia, which describes our family's battle with the deadly eating disorder, anorexia nervosa, which my teenage son Ben developed back in 2009 when he was just 15 years old. This blog post from the 15th of February 2011 is called "What if anorexia hadn't stolen 20 months from his life?" I went through a lengthy phase last year where I could scarcely bear to look at other teenagers, especially those that looked ultra fit, happy and healthy. The stark contrast between them and my son was the strongest when he used to slouch across the school car park at the end of the day, looking emaciated, gaunt, tired and miserable, with dark rings round his eyes and his clothes hanging off him. Suddenly it seemed as if everyone else was leaping and bounding across the car park, blossoming with health and full of the joys of spring, and I'd think back to the days when I would almost weep with pride at my handsome, muscular, healthy-looking son and the way girls would blush when they looked at him. Ben is still incredibly good-looking, but he is also incredibly thin. Thankfully, the dark rings have gone from around his eyes as his nutrition has improved over the past months, and he doesn't look as gaunt. But these days, I find it simply isn't helpful to compare him with his peers, nor is it helpful to wonder what might have happened in Ben's life if he hadn't been enslaved by the anorexia for the last 20 months or so. It's similar to anyone who has a child with an illness. As time goes by, you simply have to accept that, for a time, they won't be like everyone else, and there's no point in wishing that they were. But some good things have come out of this. The way Ben and I are closer than we ever might have been if the anorexia hadn't arrived on the scene. He's also much more sensitive to other people's feelings and gets on brilliantly with the girls because girls can talk deeply in a way that many teenage boys can't, and Ben likes doing that. He is recovering and he will come out of this. One day he will get his weight back and look like the big strapping lad he should be. But while we're still on the road to that destination, it's pointless comparing him with other teenagers who have more muscle and flesh than him. At least these days, when he walks across the school car park, he's usually waving goodbye enthusiastically to someone in the sixth form common room, smile on his face. Well, most times, anyway. And that's the end of that post. Ben often talked during his 20s about the way that the eating disorder stole those crucial years from his life. He went through a phase of blaming himself, saying it was all his fault that he had the eating disorder. And I said, no, it is not. It is not your fault. You didn't choose to get an eating disorder. You didn't even know what an eating disorder was when you began to develop one. It is not your fault. An eating disorder is a mental illness like any mental illnesses. No one would ever choose to be like that. And one of the very good things that has come out of Ben's experience with an eating disorder is the way that it transformed him into a very caring young man, a very compassionate young man who, for his thesis on his psychology master's degree this past year, he chose to study the compassionate mind and do a study about how compassionate mindfulness can hopefully help people to feel better about themselves and generally better about life. And he got 92% for his thesis, which was an actual study where he invited nearly 50 volunteers to work on the study over a period of 8 weeks. He devised the whole thing from start to finish with exercises and meditations and questionnaires and all kinds of things. And many of the people who were involved in the thesis study say, yes, it did help them. It helped them deal with their own mental health issues. Because that's another thing. Back in the days when I used to compare Ben to everyone else, I assumed that Ben was sick and everyone else was fine. Well, that is not the case. Many people have their own struggles with mental health. Often they're not apparent. And it turns out that some of the people who Ben was at school with also had severe struggles, which I could never have known about. And I've also found too that that's the case with families. You assume that because your child is suffering and the whole family is going through a nightmare, that other families are fine. And often that isn't the case. I've found since then that contemporaries of mine have struggled with their teenagers' mental health problems as well, from obsessive compulsive disorder to other mental health struggles. But it's important to realise that mental health struggles are not your fault, whether you're the sufferer or you're the parents of the sufferer. Really, just like any other medical problems, are not your fault. So yes, the eating disorder did steal many years of Ben's young life away from him, but eating disorders are punishingly difficult to recover from, as are other mental health problems, and it is not the young person's fault, because no one would choose to develop an eating disorder or any other mental health issue. You'll find a link below to my blog, and you'll also find a link to my website where you can download free PDFs of my blog, and also a link to Amazon where you can buy a copy of my book.